So my relationship with the story of Windbreaker initially was the fact that I only knew the story was about delinquents, and the last delinquent story I experienced kind of left me traumatized. Okay, I'll be real here. I don't really dislike the Tokyo Revengers story. I don't think it's a 10 out of 10, but I had a decent time with it, and I haven't read the ending, which most people criticize for ruining the story. But I digress. Due to Tokyo Revengers not rocking my world, when another delinquent anime came out, it wasn't on my priority list, but this anime persevered and it's still getting talked about in the general zeitgeist, so I had to check it out. And I did, and I really liked it. One major reason for me liking it was because how the narrative puts focus on the characters. This story is very character driven, and I really liked that, and it did that right from the first episode. We see the inner turmoil our main character Sakura goes through, him being an outcast because of his abnormal physical characteristics. My dude has a half white and half black hair, and his eyes are also different colors, since society isn't very accepting of that, so he himself has given up on society. And this is a very stark contrast to what we see in Tokyo Revengers. In Tokyo Revengers, the hook of the story is that the protagonist gets killed and travels back in time. And for me, it's just telling of the fact that Windbreaker is more of a character-driven story and Tokyo Revengers is more plot-driven. I'm not saying one is better than the other, it's just a difference that I have noticed. So Windbreaker starts with a view into our protagonist's mental state as if he were walking on a tightrope. That's how he feels because no one accepts him. He has two colored hair and each of his eyes are dissimilar with different colors, making him a target and looked down upon, and this looks like it might have happened his whole life. For what could drive a person to be an outcast delinquent? And the reason being that's the only way he could find worth in himself. From a young age being told you're weird and different and coping with it in an unhealthy way, no wonder Sakura became a delinquent. And I'm not gonna lie, this show that I knew was about delinquents tackling such deep thematic topics was not on my radar at all, and I wasn't really expecting it. And I really appreciate that this anime tries to tackle the concept of not fitting in and being an outcast, because that's a feeling we all have faced at some point in our lives. Might be the first day of school, college, work, or being invited to a place that makes you feel uncomfortable and where things didn't go as you expected them to, and many similar instances. And I really appreciate that we see themes like this tackled right from the first episode. Also, another theme that it tackles is being desperate for human connection and seeking human connection in order not to be alone, and we explored that through Sakura, our protagonist. We can tell that Sakura was shunned his whole life because the mere fact of people accepting him for who he is freaks him out, as we saw when Tachibana, the girl he saved, invites him and she thanks him by offering him a meal, or when the townsfolk try to thank him after he and the foreign guys beat down the thugs that were terrorizing Tachibana and the townsfolk. I really like the idea of delinquents being a hero for the townsfolk. It gives them a purpose to exist, unlike in Tokyo Revengers where it felt like the delinquents didn't have a reason to exist. They weren't protecting people or selling drugs, they didn't have a solid purpose except for hanging out with each other, which makes their insane organizational structure and hierarchy that they have kinda pointless. But it makes you ask, how come delinquents are the peacekeepers and why is there no law enforcement in this town? Why is this town neglected? I hope this question gets answered. Also, one aspect of the story that I really like is the fact that the delinquents are more like a superpower teenagers. They fight in ways that is impossible for humans, they jump crazy heights, their punch is so powerful it sends people flying, and they could tolerate crazy amounts of damage and pain that could easily kill your average human. This sort of reminds me of the manga Kingdom, which is in my opinion one of the best stories in manga. In Kingdom you see a lot of crazy superhuman feats conducted by various of the main cast. You know it is impossible in reality for humans to perform such feats, but you're hyped nonetheless. And Windbreaker managed to do that for me, and also because Windbreaker tries to make the fights more meaningful by giving them emotional weight. fight, it works really well. I love the fact that this story embraces the absurdity of high school delinquents being this organized group. And there are no teachers, there are also no police, it's the teenagers that are governing themselves. And I see all this as the story not giving a damn in telling its story unapologetically, unlike some other anime. A theme that I find very fascinating about Windbreaker is that a fight is a conversation and fists are the language, which is certainly true for the story, because the way the fights are in Windbreaker, they try and make us care for the fights by showing us flashbacks of each of the combatants. It gives the fights more weight and makes them more emotional, and it saves it from being just a bunch of dudes beating the crap out of each other, which is fine, but I wouldn't consider it peak storytelling. And one such fight that I thought was going to be mindless action and turned out to be quite emotionally impactful was the fight between Hiragi, one of the 4 heavenly kings of Furin, and Sako of Shishitoren. The backstory in this was one I found to be quite emotional. We see that Sako and Hiragi used to be good friends in the past, and things turned out sour when Sako's image of Hiragi gets shattered. You see, Sako put Hiragi on a pedestal, and Hiragi turned out different from what Sako expected. It was a huge blow to Sako's beliefs, and he felt betrayed even though Hiragi wasn't wrong by any means. And the fact that this subtextual struggle is going on during their fight enhances it way more compared to had there not been any meaning to their fight and it was just a bunch of dudes scrapping it out. And another character that I was taken aback by was Togami, the second in command of Shishitoren. In the Furin vs Shishitoren arc, he looked like your typical scumbag villain at first when he just beat one of his underlings for a small misdemeanor, but the flashbacks strike again. We learned that he didn't become this dude who callously beats down and strips the jackets of his mates because he was some generic antagonist. No, there is depth to it. He didn't want his friend Choji Tomiyama, who is their boss and the leader of Shishitoren, who became unhinged because he got so strong that he became bored and started beating down his own men, which borderline almost led him to go fully into the dark side. So Togami opted to do the nasty work of handing out punishments so that he doesn't lose the kind and cheerful boss he came to befriend and who means so much to him. But saying that, I wish the motivation for Choji was more personal, because him going crazy and evil because he was bored seems kind of lackluster compared to had he had a personal motivation. I mean, it is still personal for Togami, so I guess it's alright. After all was said and done and the Furin group and Shishitoren group make amends, I like the realization that Togami had. The realization that instead of going along with the demands of his increased boss Choji, he should have confronted him. And watching that scene was very satisfying, and again, this is what Windbreakers does right, turning what would have been a mindless slugfest filled delinquent anime into something meaningful which I didn't see coming. And it really makes me appreciate the story. During the Umemiya and Choji Tomiyama fight in the Shishitoren vs Furin arc of season 1, I thought the flashback thing will get tired at some point and will turn the fights into something cheesy, but it didn't happen and the emotions kept striking again and again. Also, even though I criticized the character motivations for Choji to be kind of lackluster, I don't really dislike it because striving to achieve something for so long and feeling empty is a very common phenomenon that we see many people face in real life. So even though for me it was lackluster, it doesn't mean it was poor writing. I mean, Choji reached the pinnacle of strength and he felt empty after that, and that is totally reasonable except for the fact that he blamed his emptiness on his friends, which in turn turned him into the antagonist of the arc. Also, one downside of this Furin vs Shishitoren arc was that it dragged a bit. It was way longer than I expected it to be, but other than that, I liked it. And one character that I really like in this story is Umemiya. He inspires everyone, even our MC Sakura, who is hot-headed and is very confused by Umemiya's demeanor. To be honest, Sakura is not the only one who is confused by Umemiya's demeanor. That includes us, the audience too. You'd think the boss of a bunch of delinquents would be someone menacing and serious, but Umemiya couldn't be far from that. He is very silly, laid back, and very reasonable, but when he gets serious, all the characters in the story, i.e. his henchmen, stop messing about. And the seriousness of Umemiya in those moments and the aura he exudes is menacing AF. And those moments just gives you goosebumps. I also like how he is a therapist to the boys and Sakura. One prominent theme of Windbreaker is purpose and its importance. We see this theme explored explicitly through Umemiya, Choji, and many others, like when Umemiya was fighting Choji and he tells him that his punches are weak because he has no purpose, and seeing Sakura struggling to have purpose, people to care for, and not be alone is always going to be one of the highlights of this story for me. If you've made it this far into the video, please make sure to subscribe to the channel, it'll mean a lot, and with that said, see you guys in the next one.